Namaste. So this is a short video around the topic of action. The reason I wanted to talk of this topic is that I personally, had the maximum questions around action in the earlier years of my spiritual journey. Questions like, what is the right action for me? What is the right action in a given situation? What decision should I take? What is the purpose of my life? What path should I take? So I remember being very confused about, how do we know what is the right action? Because whatever action you take really alters the course of your life. So I remember being almost paralyzed with, these kinds of questions. And I wish that at that time there had been, some videos that I could watch specifically on this topic. And so I thought I would just, do one of these because I know a lot of people struggle with these kinds of questions as well. So I wanted to tie things back to the Bhagavad Gita and, take a few quotes from there. I could also just speak from my own experience and from my own insights, but I think it's good to refer back to some authority, especially in this day and age where you have so many spiritual teachings on the internet, and a lot of times it's somebody's ideas and opinions, which, can create a subtle misunderstandings in the minds of the seekers, which can at some point be quite detrimental. So I think it's good, to tie things into a particular system or a tradition or a line of thought or an authority or a shastra. So, the Bhagavad Gita is often referred to as a karma yoga text because it is one of the few shastras that goes into practical action involving our daily life in great depth and profundity. And it really explains what is karma yoga, the essence, of what is considered to be karma yoga. So it talks about nishkama karma, which is desireless action. And there's many other concepts that it brings up in relation to action and, how we should act in the world. What is considered nishkama karma? What is considered desireless action? And how do we get to a stage where we're able to act in that way? Because I think, action is one area of life that brings the maximum suffering to people and has the potential to as well. So like I said, it can alter the course of your life. A lot of people really suffer, from things like indecision or having to make choices. And honestly speaking, it actually lies at the crux of all of spirituality, the concept of doership especially. So while I've said that we're all often confused about our action, worried about what action to take, the real question is, are you the doer of the action? And we don't come to that question until somebody points it out to us. And that's what spirituality is all about. That's what the spiritual path is all about, is to question that doership. So you may start out with questions around action and, wanting to know how best to live your life and how to achieve the maximum result from your action. But then any good spiritual teacher or a guru will soon guide you to the idea that you are not the doer. So we'll bring you to question, you've just assumed that you are the actor and you have volition and you have control and you bear the results of your action. But have you really thought about whether or not you actually are the doer? Have you thought about the fact that if there were not certain forces moving in your body, certain gunas moving in your body, like the rajasic guna, which propels us into action, that you would not be able to move? Have you thought about the fact that you can't even make one hair grow on your body of your own free will? Have you thought about the fact that you don't control how the blood flows in your body? You're not consciously controlling your heartbeat. You're not always aware of your breath even, which is what is keeping you alive. And then you assume that you are the doer of these great things in the world. So, a guru will always bring you to question the doership, because that is where the ego or the ahankar is hanging out, in that feeling that I'm the doer and I'm the experiencer, karta, bhokta. So I do actions and I experience the fruit of their result. And this is a condition of the jiva who is attached to the body and mind. And any spiritual teacher will bring us to question these things. So if we just look at it through the lens of the Bhagavad Gita, because there is so much good teaching that's buried in the Bhagavad Gita around understanding action. So first is, as I mentioned, the nishkama karma aspect. So doing action without desire. That's what Krishna says to Arjuna, that act but don't be attached to your action. And this seems the hardest thing to do, because how can I act if I'm not anticipating the fruits or the result of my action? For most of us, that is what propels us to act. So I myself have been, the massive overachiever in life. And I know for sure that it was always a vision of what I will attain, that was the impulse behind my action. So if that is not there, if the carrot that dangles at the end is taken away, then for what reason do we act? So that's where you begin the journey of going through all of the spiritual teachings and understanding and imbibing them, and then having the experiential knowledge and of what is our essential nature, and why is it that all of these ways that we've been used to are actually incorrect or invalid, and we need to change the way we operate. We need to change the way we look at life, and we look at things like action. So I'm just going to read out a few quotes relating to this from the Gita. So starting in chapter 2, chapter 2, verse 47 and 48, Krishna says, your right is to work only and never to the fruit thereof. Do not consider yourself to be the cause of the fruit of action, nor let your attachment be to inaction. Then he says, Arjuna, perform your duties established in yoga. So this is a famous shloka, yogasthah kuru karmani, sangam tyaktva dhananjaya. Renouncing attachment and be even-minded in success and failure. Evenness of mind is called yoga. So, the first verse, the first shloka is telling you not to be attached to the fruit of action. And then the second shloka, he's saying, how do you achieve that? Because like I said, most of us would respond by saying, it's completely impossible. How can I give up attachment to the fruits? And therefore, he's saying, giving the solution in the next shloka, where he says, do your action being established in yoga. And that by default will make you free of that action. Because being in yoga means that you're not swayed by the good and the bad, by the win and the loss, by the sorrow and the joy. So when you're in yoga means that you're established in your true self, or in the self. And then you're merely the witness, because you know that your true nature is the Atman, or the soul, which is not bound by the material world. And so you would just automatically not be attached to the fruits, because you wouldn't care about the fruits of action, because you know that you're not going to gain anything or lose anything from the action. And there's a natural impulse to just do your best at whatever you're doing. That's a natural impulse in a human being. And when you're established in yoga, your activity will be of that natural nature. Natural nature sounds almost, repetitive, but that's the natural way. What we also refer to as sahaj. So your right is to work only and never to the fruit thereof. Do not consider yourself to be the cause of the fruit of action. And he's told Arjuna that I have already killed these people. I have already killed this army. And all you have to do is to take the credit and the glory by doing your dharma and acting in battle. So that's another clue that Sri Krishna is giving, saying that I am the doer. I have already done it, in fact. So the script has already been written. You just have to come and play your part. So now how is Sri Krishna the doer? That actually comes through understanding the bhakti aspect, which is, comes towards the end of the Gita, because, a lot of people think that bhakti is a very preliminary practice and it's just about praying to God for what you need and keeping God on your side, keeping God happy, or keeping yourself happy psychologically through prayer. But no, actually bhakti is I would say the highest. And to be in devotion is really the way to live life. And everything else comes automatically. If you are in bhakti, if you are a devotee, then you will naturally do your best at everything you're doing, because you see the manifestation as the play of God, who is your beloved. So why would you not want to do the best for your beloved? Or you see everybody as a manifestation of God. And so why would you treat them as anything less than God? Internally, maybe, externally, you may have to take tough actions. So the Bhagavad Gita itself is set on the battlefield where Arjuna has to kill somebody. But still, that doesn't take away from the fact that, in your heart, you can be a devotee and still view the world as the manifestation of God or as the body of God, and still do whatever action you may be required to do. So, so Sri Krishna only very briefly gives that hint in the beginning about the bhakti path, in saying that I have already done this. But later on, he'll say more about how he is the one who makes the manifestation run, essentially. And he is the manifestation himself. So when he shows the Virat Swarup, he shows that everything is in me, is happening within me. And at the same time, he says, everything is in me, but I'm not in them. I'm not in this manifestation because I'm beyond it. So that's, I would say, the first aspect around action, that you're not entitled to the fruits. And we know this from our own life experience. You never get the results that you think you will. You don't always get the results that you hope for. You can hope, but you don't have control over what happens. So that's, well known to us. And so Krishna is only helping you be free from sorrow, because, he's saying you already know that you can't control the result. So why be so attached to the result? So he's giving you permission to, ignore the result and just act out of joy or out of devotion, or just out of the sense of duty that this is my dharma, this is what I have to do. And then he's saying, so be established in yoga. So be established in any one of these yogas. Bhakti, where you surrender your action to God, or jnana, where you have the vivek, the discernment or the discrimination to see that you are merely a witness and the action is happening through you, and you're not the agent and you're not the doer. So that would be the Gyan Yoga teaching. Or Karma Yoga. So you do it, but completely without any selfish motive. You just do the work for the sake of the work. So there's also another verse here in chapter 18, verse number 23, where he says, that action which is ordained by the scriptures and is not accompanied by the sense of doership and has been done without any attachment or aversion by one who seeks no return is called sattvic. It's giving the definition of what is sattvic action. So one that is ordained by the scriptures, is not accompanied by a sense of doership, done without attachment or aversion. That's of the nature of the sattvic action. And we all know that, the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Tamas is the lowest or the grossest, and the one you want the least of. And the sattvic is the quality that you want the most in yourself, because that's the quality of clarity, peace, and purity. The rajas, which is in the middle, is the activity of passion, of wanting to do things in the world, of activity. It could also be restlessness and passion. So that's like the first teaching on action is, do it without desire of the fruits. Do it established in yoga. And then, we might question, why should I not desire the fruits? If I'm doing the action and I've put myself into it, then should I not be entitled to the fruits of action? We might have such a question. And so to address those kinds of things, there's other details given. So in chapter 3, Krishna says, in fact, all actions are being performed by the modes of Prakriti. The fool whose mind is deluded by egoism thinks I am the doer. And then he says, however, he who has true insight into the respective spheres of gunas, which are the modes of Prakriti and their actions, holding that it is the gunas in the form of the senses, mind, etc., that move among the gunas, which are objects of perception, does not get attached to them, Arjuna. So here he's saying, again, that point about doership. Look, you are not the doer. So we won't ever get past the sense of attachment to action and its fruits until we come to this point about you are not the doer. And how do you understand that? So this is a Sankhya teaching of understanding that all of Prakriti, everything that happens, and Prakriti includes our own body and mind. So if you study Sankhya philosophy, there's this, or you can look it up, there's this Sankhya diagram or chart, which shows you all the different tattvas of the manifest world as it is described by Sankhya. So, for instance, from the consciousness emerges first what they call the Mahat, which is like the cosmic mind. From that, individualizes into, the buddhi in one individual human being, which is the intellect. You have the ahankar, which is the I, ego sense. You have the chitta, and you have the manas, which are again parts of the mind. You have the 5 sense organs, 5 organs of action. You have the subtle elements, the tanmatras, and then you have the panchamahabhutas, which are the 5 elements of earth, water, fire, air, and space. So that's the Sankhya view of the manifestation of reality, of Prakriti is what's called. So here Krishna is bringing out that teachings that look, everything in the manifest world is just Prakriti, and that's driven by the gunas. So the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are the constituents of Prakriti. They are what make up Prakriti. So they're subtle, they're not physical. They're subtle qualities, and the entire Prakriti is made up of these 3 gunas. So So, the fool whose mind is deluded by egoism thinks that I am the doer. So, he's saying that the doer are the gunas of Prakriti, there's no individual you who is the doer. You are the consciousness. So, Sankhya actually builds into the Jnana Yoga. So, from this understanding, you come to the understanding, I am merely the witness of Prakriti. So, the Purusha in Sankhya, which is the consciousness, is the witness of Prakriti. So, you're the witness of the action of the gunas. You are not the doer. So here he's explaining in the Jnana Yoga way. So the first one that we saw was, the desireless action. That's more just the Karma Yoga teaching. So be established in yoga and act without desire for the fruits. This one you could say is the Jnana Yoga teaching around action, is to merely be the witness. And there are more references here. I'm just going to check what else I had noted down. In chapter 13, you have verse 29, where he says, he who sees that all actions are performed in every way by nature, Prakriti, and the self as the non-doer, he alone sees. It's again the same point. And then further in chapter 14, 23, he who, sitting like a witness, is not disturbed by the gunas, and who, knowing that the gunas alone move among the gunas, remains established in identity with God and never falls off from that state. And then he says, he who is ever established in the self takes pain and pleasure alike, regards a clod of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold as equal in value, is possessed of wisdom, accepts the pleasant as well as the unpleasant in the same spirit, and views censure and praise alike. So again, the same point. He is equipoised in honor or ignominy, is alike towards a friend and enemy, has renounced the sense of doership in all undertakings, is said to have risen above the three gunas. So now he's saying how you can rise above the gunas. So he's saying, look, you are not the gunas of Prakriti. You are something that transcends them. You are beyond. You are the witness. And then he too who constantly worships me through the yoga of exclusive devotion, transcending these three gunas, he becomes eligible for attaining Brahman. For I am the substratum of the imperishable Brahma, of immortality, of the eternal Dharma, and of unending, immutable bliss. And, so the question might arise that, okay, if I'm not the doer and the gunas are the doer, then I might just sit back and see, when the gunas move and what the gunas do. And so there might be a tendency towards inaction. And so let's address this point. So what Krishna says to address something like this, there's two aspects here. First, let's go to chapter 3.33, where he says, all living creatures follow their tendencies. Even the wise man acts according to the tendencies of his own nature. Of what use is restraint by force? So, he's saying that you will be moved to act by the tendencies of your own nature. So every creature, even a wise man, is driven by the tendencies of his own nature. So you will be driven to act. Now, you may as well act willingly and not only enjoy life, but also, earn yourself greater self-respect. Because, Prakriti will force you to act. And if you try to restrain it by force, that's called, inaction. So if you don't act, then that has its own consequences. So this, leads up to one of the most interesting verses, I think, in the Bhagavad Gita regarding action and inaction. So chapter 4, verse 18. He says, "He who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among men. He is a yogi who has performed all actions." So seeing inaction in action and action in inaction. What does that mean? Seeing inaction in action, let's look at that first, is what we've just been speaking about. So there's action happening, but the jnani sees that nothing is happening, really. Because he is not the doer. So according to him, nothing has happened. He is purely the witness consciousness. And then the second part, action in inaction. So there's two ways, I think, that we can look at this. So action in inaction would be firstly that, you have a sage, say, for example, or anybody who's on the meditative path. They may not outwardly be acting physically, and you might think they're just sitting in a room doing nothing. This is something a lot of people, of the world, they throw these allegations at people who are living in ashrams or following the life of a sadhu. They say that, they sit around doing nothing, whereas look at us, we work so hard for a living. But what they don't realize is that that person who's sitting in meditation or sitting quietly in a room is doing tremendous amount of inner work. Because just to be able to sit quietly without truly doing anything is not easy. People think it's very easy. I'm also going to give up my job and my family and just go and sit and not do anything. But you can try. You can try for a day and see how it goes. Before your mind drives you completely insane and before you're restless and wanting to, go out and eat all the nicest things, watch TV, watch YouTube. It's really not easy. And somebody who is following that meditative path, they are doing harder work than you would be doing in your office or even in the fields, because that inner work it requires much more energy. And what is this inner work? So it's being able to witness your thoughts and whatever is coming up within the mind, and to not react and to not act on it. That's really the work of a sadhu or anybody, a sadhaka, is to watch your mind constantly, what is coming up in your mind, and not letting anything grow within the mind, not letting it take root, not letting it become a seed in the mind, become a tree, because then that'll force you into action, it'll force you into desire. So, that kind of extreme vigilance is the hardest work, much harder than physical labor. So the one who sees action in inaction. So, outwardly, sadhu is sitting, not acting. But if you can see that there is tremendous action going on within him, then you understand. You're somebody who understands the deeper meanings of things. Then he is wise among men. And I would say another way of reading this, seeing action in inaction, is actually seeing God. Because we say that God is not involved in the world, let's say, because you can't see him acting. But he is acting in the world through everything. So it may look like inaction on the part of God, that he's not physically out there doing things in a way that we can see, but everything is powered by him. So even in his case, it is, action, even though it seems like inaction. There's action happening. And actually, a third way you can look at this is also, deciding not to act, or the choice made to not do something is also doing something. So you may say that I've taken the decision not to act. So one might say, okay, you've chosen inaction, but that is also an action. So one who sees action in inaction. So I think this is such an amazing verse that can have so many different interpretations and has so much subtlety within it. It really helps us to see so much. And the other way of reading inaction and action, which was the first thing, is also seeing that you're not the doer. So, you may be acting outwardly, but if someone can see that you're not acting at all, it's because they can see that it's God's movement. It's not your movement. You're not doing it at all. So seeing inaction, your inaction in your action, is another way to read that one. So, just that opens up so much insight into action, just that one verse. And then let's go to the final point that I had regarding action. So we've looked at desireless action. So we know, okay, work without desire. We've looked at the jnana yoga perspective, that you are not the doer. The gunas are the doer, you are the witness. And what that does, it not only frees us from action, it also frees us from blame and guilt. So even regarding other people's action, if we see that they are also not the doer, then we wouldn't have any blame towards anybody or even towards any situation, because we know that, look, there's only one doer, so who else could it be but God? And this is why the saints and sages have such an acceptance of life and such a deep surrender to life. There are these stories of saints who show in such extreme ways that they really are not even in the slightest in resistance to life. So I think there's a story, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's Sant Tukaram, who, once his house was on fire, and the village people, came to the house and said, and they saw him throwing things into that fire, taking things from his house and adding to that fire. And, the village people came and said, what is wrong with you? What are you doing? You should be trying to put out the fire. He said, no, obviously the fire has been sent by God and the fire wants to burn, so I'm helping it. Because obviously it's God's will that my house be burnt down. So, have such extreme examples that they, it's their leela to show you that, look, just look at the level of acceptance of what is happening. Whereas we are constantly in resistance to what's happening in life. No, it shouldn't be this way. It should be my way. Why did that happen? Why did this happen? It should have happened like this, should have happened like that. Not only for our own life, but everybody else's as well. They should be doing this. They should be doing that. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? Even Swami Haridas Ji, he was beaten in 22 marketplaces. He was the avatar of Lalita Sakhi, and one of the close associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, lived in Vrindavan. And during the Mughal period, so he was, beaten up once by one of the Mughal kings, officials. And he was taken to 22 marketplaces and beaten up. And never once did he fight back. And never once did he complain or cry. But he kept just chanting the name of Krishna with every whip that he got. He would chant even louder and he would say, Krishna is whipping me. And he would be in bliss that Krishna is whipping him. So we have these, examples of such extreme devotion to life that you are not against anything that life does. You hold absolutely nothing of your own where you're demanding that life be this way or that way. So I think that covers up, action without desire, allowing action to happen through you, and realizing that it's not your action. And these examples actually bring us to this last point that I had. I think they're quite nicely bringing us to this point naturally. So in chapter 3.9 says, man is bound by his own action, except when it is performed for the sake of sacrifice. Therefore, Arjuna, do you efficiently perform your duty, free from attachment, for the sake of sacrifice alone. So this is the concept of yajna, which comes up a fair bit. Yajnartham. So for the sake of yajna. Now, the yajna is a very important and subtle concept in all of the teachings of the Shastra. So it appears obviously in the Vedas. And there they talk about physical yajnas or ceremonies, rituals to conduct. The fire ritual is what is a yajna in its physical sense. But in the subtler sense, yajna is, metaphorically, all of life is a yajna. And within a Brahmagyani, let's say, there is always a yajna happening, which means that nothing is for any personal use. Everything is an offering. So in a yajna, there's a fire, and you make offerings to that fire of ghee and various other things, and even some valuable items may be put in the sacrifice. And the thing is that when you say sacrifice, it's because you are not wanting anything back. So everything is an offering. So the life of somebody who is in deep devotion is simply an offering. That's what it means, somebody who performs actions as yajna, not looking for anything in return, not looking for self-interest, not looking to gain anything, but just as an offering into life, into the yajna of life. That is what defines a wise person. And so I think just to tie up, all those themes regarding action, so doing action without looking for the fruits, the nishkama karma, without desire, being established in yoga, and realizing that you are not the doer, but the gunas are the doer, and you are merely the witness. And knowing that nature will take its course anyway. The result of all of that is that your life becomes a yajna. So you're living in devotion, you're living as a karma yogi, or you're living as a jnani. It comes to the same. So in the end, it is just a yajna. It is an offering into life. So I think that's quite a good deep dive into some of the main themes regarding action in the Bhagavad Gita. So if you do have any questions, or you want to leave a comment on this topic or any other topic, or if you'd like me to talk about any other topic in the future, you can either leave a comment or you can send me an email. So thank you very much for your attention. Wishing you a lot of love and light. Namaste.